Darkcast Network. Come to the dark side of podcasts. We have cookies.
Cookies? We love cookies.
A Nefarious Nightmare is a true crime podcast focusing on lesser-known crimes and crimes against those deemed extra vulnerable.
Every now and then, we cover more well-known crimes due to the fact that it is relevant or even interesting regarding the cases we cover. And the B is a symbol for all victims as we recognize their strength, resilience, and vulnerability.
So, join us. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or just about any podcast platform. Remember, when you mess with the bees,
you get the hive.
Hey there, my favorite Rainbow Warrior patrons. It's the end of the month and time for a ride on our unicorns. The unicorns have been doing pretty well at the Seabreeze Studios stables, although I think the cold weather here has made them a little bit lazy. They seem to be putting on some extra weight. I think they're going to be very happy to get out for that ride. Can I just ask, what the fuck is going on here in the United States? First the Nashville school shooting, and then a week and a half later, another mass shooting at a bank in Louisville, Kentucky. According to Wikipedia, which I don't reference often, there were 52 mass shootings in January of this year. That resulted in 87 deaths and 205 wounded. 43 mass shootings in February with 54 deaths and 160 injured. 39 mass shootings in March, 55 dead and 105 injured. And since April isn't quite over, we don't have a tally yet. But since the year started, we've had 134 mass shootings in the United States. And that's not counting April. It's downright scary out there. To be honest, I wrote this Patreon exclusive a couple weeks ago, and those statistics have probably increased. It's getting to the point no one's going to want to leave their homes. But then again, are we safe at home? I don't know, warriors. I think I prefer my little fantasy land I live in at the Seabreeze Studio stables. It's safe here in my brain, and I don't get dark ideas or urges to kill, unless I'm playing Call of Duty on my Xbox. Thankfully, otherwise y'all would have to have me committed. I hope you're doing good, and I'd love it if you'd reach out and let me know what's going on in your life. I'm writing a book, or I should say I've been working on a book. It's a series of short stories about LGBTQ+ teenagers that have been murdered. The story I have for you today is the second story in that book. If you're all ready to go, I'm ready to tell you about the story of Jessica Hernandez. So get on your unicorns and ride! Giddy up, sparkle farts, and let's get on with the story. The Denver, Colorado police policy states that officers should not shoot into moving vehicles unless the officer is in imminent danger. And yet, even with this policy in place, 17-year-old Hispanic lesbian Jessica Hernandez was fired upon and killed as she was in a car with 3 friends in a stolen Honda. Jessica, who went by Jessie, was no saint. Of course, not many of us are. She was a teenager and she did some stupid-ass things, like stealing a car. She made mistakes. Yes, she made mistakes. We all do. But Jessie wasn't a hardcore, troubled teenager either. She lived in her family's mobile home with her parents and 5 siblings. Her family wasn't well off. They struggled to make ends meet. But for the most part, they were a loving family living on the line of poverty. Jessie was an advocate against bullies, and she always cheered on and tried to protect the underdogs, the nerds, the less fortunate. She even occasionally would bring stray animals home to take care of. Jessie had a kind heart, and she did her best to be a good friend. On January 1st, 2015, Jessie, who had a revoked driver's license, had taken her mom's car out. No, she wasn't the safest Jessie, who had a revoked driver's license, had taken her mom's car out. She wasn't the safest driver on the road. She had what some of us call a lead foot. Jessie liked to drive fast. She was north of Denver when she was pulled over by a Colorado state trooper for going 80 miles per hour. This was in a 55-mile-per-hour speed zone on the interstate. The trooper claimed Jessie was trying to elude him and resist arrest in a manner that threatened his safety and others. He did not shoot into her moving vehicle to stop her, and eventually she came to a stop on her own. I'm not exactly sure why he would say she was trying to elude arrest. Why would you arrest someone for a speeding ticket? And there was no further comment on the officer's report about it. This statement by the state trooper clearly makes no sense. But 3 weeks later, after her death on January 26th, the citation she received was dismissed. How kind of them. The night of January 25th, 2015, Jessie and a few of her friends had stolen a silver-colored Honda Accord. See, dumb choices by teenagers. With Jessie as the driver, the teens 15 years to 17 years old, they did some joyriding. With Jessie as the driver, the teens in the car were 15 years to 17 years old, and they were out doing some joyriding. Around 3 a.m., they pulled into the back of an alley of a residential section in Denver, and they fell asleep. Around 6:30 a.m., residents in nearby homes were waking up. They were getting ready for their day. One noticed a suspicious-looking vehicle in the back alleyway just sitting there idling. It was just sitting there idling. I gathered that Jessie probably had the heat going, and that's why the car was idling. It was January in Colorado. Oh, I said that already. One noticed a suspicious-looking vehicle in the back alleyway just sitting there idling. It was January and most likely very cold. So the car was running with the heat on while the teens slept. The windows appeared to be fogged up, and the neighbor called the police to report the car. An officer responded and ran the plates of the vehicle, discovering that the vehicle had been reported stolen. He called for a backup officer. By now, one of the teenagers in the car awoke and alerted the other teens in the car. By now, one of the teenagers in the car had awoken, and By now, one of the teenagers in the car had awoken, and she alerted the other teens in the car that the cops were there. Another officer arrived on the scene, and they began to approach the stolen vehicle with the teenage inhabitants. Another officer arrived on the scene. Slowly, they began to approach the stolen vehicle with the teenage inhabitants. Slowly, with their guns drawn, they began to approach the stolen vehicle with the teenage inhabitants. Slowly, with their guns drawn, they began to approach the stolen vehicle with the teenage inhabitants. According to the officers, they yelled for the occupants of the car to get out slowly, hands where they could see them. According to the officers, they yelled for the occupants to get out of the car, hands where they could see them. Hands where they could see them. But instead, Jessie put the vehicle in reverse and slowed. But instead, Jessie put the vehicle in reverse, and she slowly tried to back away from the police. Although they appeared to be blocked in the alleyway by the But instead, Jessie put the vehicle in reverse, and she But instead, Jessie put the vehicle in reverse, and she slowly tried to back away from the police. Although it did appear that the police had blocked the alleyway. Although it appeared that they were blocked in the alleyway by the two police cars. One of the officers physically to the side of the stolen car. One of the officers who was standing physically to the side of the stolen car, he alleged he was nearly pinned between the car and a fence. He knew he was about to be squashed if he didn't do something quickly, so he fired into the car. This same officer claimed that his leg was injured. A description which has been elaborated upon. A description which has been elaborated upon by the Denver Police Department, saying that his leg was broken, fractured. A description that has been elaborated upon by the Denver Police Department, first saying that the officer's leg was broken, fractured, and then simply injured. He supposedly was treated at a hospital and released. The other officer also fired several times into the car, striking the driver, Jessie. All in all, Jessie was shot 4 times. She was shot twice in her torso, once in her pelvis and right thigh. She was shot twice in her torso, once in her pelvis, and once in her right thigh. Coroners believe the bullet hitting her pelvis may have ricocheted off of her pelvis, causing the damage. Coroners believe that the bullet that hit her pelvis might have ricocheted off the pelvis bone, causing the damage to her right thigh. The final fatal shot damaged her heart and lungs, killing Jessie. It damaged her heart and lungs, killing Jessie. The teenage witnesses also in the car have an account of what happened, and it differed greatly from the narrative painted by the 2 police officers, who, by the way, did not have dashboard cameras or body cams. The teens in the car with her say she was shot first. She lost control of the car, and that's when the vehicle started to veer into one of the officers. When the car came to a stop, Jessie, who possibly was already dead, and if she wasn't, she was unconscious, she was yanked from the stolen vehicle, thrown to the ground face first, causing injury to her nose, and she was handcuffed. When the car came to a stop, Jessie, who possibly was already dead, and if she wasn't, she was unconscious, was yanked from the stolen vehicle, thrown to the ground face first, causing injury to her nose, and she was handcuffed. Jessie's autopsy report indicated that none of the shots fired from the officers were at close range, disputing the fact that Jessie was driving at one of the officers. Serious doubts of the officers' claims of Jessie driving towards one of the officers has been raised. Serious doubts of the officers' claims that Jessie was driving towards them had been raised. Serious doubts of the officers' claims that Jessie was driving towards them has been raised. But unfortunately it has not been proven. Both officers were on paid leave while an investigation occurred. The officer who claimed self-defense was cleared of any criminal wrongdoing in Jessie's murder. Her parents filed a civil suit against the Denver Police Department. Sadly, Jessie's body tested positive for low amounts of marijuana and alcohol, plus the matter of the stolen vehicle. It could seriously be a detriment to their case if they proceeded. With the exception of very recently, January 2023, no Denver police officer has been indicted for over a generation. With the exception of very recently, as recent as January 2023, no Denver police officer has been indicted for over a generation. Not since 1992. It's said that the district attorney's office wears kid gloves when dealing with the Denver Police Department. This is in spite of 4 officer shootings into moving vehicles within 7 months time period. This is in spite of 4 officer shootings into moving vehicles within a 7 month. This is in spite of 4 officers shooting into moving vehicles within a 7-month time period in 2015. The recent indictment was due to a Denver cop shooting at a suspect and injuring 5 other innocent bystanders in the process. Rest in power, Jessie. I know this was a short Patreon exclusive. I know this was a short episode, guys, I know this was a short episode. And it's mostly because I've been working on a regular long one for the regular. And it's mostly because I've been working And it's mostly because I've been working on kind of a long one for the regular show that I'm putting out just about the same time this one comes out. Rest in power, Jessie. I think I did say that. And guys, I'm sorry that this one is going to be such a short Patreon exclusive episode. It's mostly due to the fact that I've been putting a lot of time into a little bit longer one for the regular episode. It's mostly due in fact that I've been putting together a longer one for the regular episode it's mostly due to the fact that I've been putting together a little bit longer one for a regular episode. That episode's gonna release probably about the same time as this one. So bear with me, we're back at the Seabreeze Studios stables. I love you, Rainbow Warrior patrons. You make my life shine. Remember, you matter. And it's not a crime to be gay. Unless you're a murderer.